Hi everyone and welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and I got a couple bins I'd like to take care of in terms of just getting them fed today. It's been 8 days since they were last fed, and when I fed them 8 days ago they got a bunch of stuff like mango seeds. Something like that'll take forever, but besides that they got banana peels, they got chunks of melon, coffee I think. They got all kinds of stuff that I believe is going to be for the most part gone already. I mean, if there was a banana peel in there, maybe we'll see a stem. After 8 days, it kind of makes sense that, maybe something like that will be remaining as a leftover. But really quick before we get to work on these, I thought I'd bring in my little board here, my information board with a bunch of vital statistics about the two bins that we're going to be working on. The NE over here represents northeast, and the little sticker that you see over there, that round sticker, also represents northeast worms. Those are the northeast worms that I received. It was a batch of African nightcrawlers. ANCs is how I abbreviate that. And when I first launched that bin 77 days ago, the entire batch of worms that I received went into that container. But then 31 days ago, I started plucking the adult worms, the large mature sized worms, out of the big box. And I started the little green box that you see down on the floor over there. That's the 31-day container. And after 8 days, I got a feeling all those fruits that we fed them are probably gone, or for the most part gone. So my idea was to go in here, grab some stuff from the refrigerator, and make sure these two bins have enough food to keep them going. So I'm going to put on a glove and get the bins up here onto the bench so we can get to work. So let's get started. Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot. There was a couple other numbers on here that I didn't really make reference to what they meant, or I didn't have any sort of column headers here to indicate what these numbers were, but basically this is the estimated number of worms in each, starting with a figure of 500 worms, which is what I was told I was being given when I received the worms, and then kind of this many was deducted from that 500 to leave that number behind. Over the course of 2 haul outs of adult worms being put into the small container, these are the numbers that we've ended up with. These numbers were pretty much almost counted precisely. It wasn't just estimates based on looking at a wad of worms or based on weight. It was actually looking at me individually, picking worms out one by one. So they might be off by 1 or 2, but they're pretty darn accurate, at least for the small container. For the large container, the rough estimate of 500 as the starting number in here, that's, who knows, that could be anyone's guess whether that's accurate or not. Besides the worms, I was also told that there's cocoons, there's baby worms, there's all kinds of other stuff in here too. So I just have this sort of funny feeling that maybe that this system probably even has more than what we expect it to have. So since we fed all kinds of delicious fruits and everything, it might be a good chances for us to actually see how many worms we've got in here, because maybe they all came out for the yummy meal of banana and melon. There would have been a mango seed placed into each last time. Kind of a slow composting item. An item that we'll undoubtedly keep seeing over and over and over in many feedings going forward. It's like, here's a chunk of banana peel, because I can already see the stem of it. A little bit of fiber holding the stem to the rest of the peel, but there's a whole bunch of it right here, not even hardly disturbed. I don't see any worms yet either, which is, well, okay, finally getting there. Finally getting down into the gooey dampness of the foods. Some of the stuff I think that I'm digging through is actually coffee. I've got coffee for these feedings too, but they're going to have to share. They're going to have to share 1 day's worth of coffee. Each bin is only going to get half of what's in the filter. Usually I've got at least a whole thing of coffee to give my bins, but in this case I've only got 1. Lots of little itsy bitsy worms in here. As promised, not surprising. In the other bin I would not expect to see itsy bitsy worms yet, because it was all adult worms that I explicitly selected based on their size and their girth and everything, the fact that they might have the appearance of being mature breeding age. But I mean, that just that mango seed right there has probably got to, have 50 worms hanging out on it. So that's why I just have this kind of funny feeling about the estimate of this bin maybe being a little bit understated. So I don't think that this is just 200 some odd worms. There's probably a whole lot more in here. So I think we'll only know at some point in the near future when all of those cocoons have hatched, and even after they've hatched, the baby worms are so tiny that you can hardly see them. At some point soon, we'll start seeing those worms growing to a size big enough that they'll be easy to recognize and spot in the bin. And then we'll start getting a better sense of how many worms we've actually got here in the system. Okay, I've kind of turned up the feeding area, looking for leftovers. This looks like it might be a piece of mango, or maybe banana peel. Yeah, maybe mango. What else do we have down here? A lot of this is actually just bedding that's been sort of soaked with all those juices of the food that was put in here. And a lot of times the worms are perfectly content to hang out in that fruit juice soaked bedding. So we've got a pretty good size opening. We did get a chance to see a few worms here and there. And we even found a little bit of leftovers, which I kind of expected, because with banana peels, it's fair to expect that banana peel, unless you've got a really vigorous and productive worm bin, a peel usually is still around after 8 days, like what we've had here as far as an interval between feedings. A week from now, we might still find the stem, but at that point, I would think the majority of that peel would probably be gone. There again, kind of depending on the capability of the bin, which is often, a direct correlation to the number of worms that occupy the bin. So we're going to dip into my little collection of pre-made bedding over here. I actually spent some time today shredding paper and making some more of this here. But what's on the very, very top layer of this is the old stuff that I already had sitting around for a couple weeks. It's the stuff right below it that is still kind of not yet primed, so I'll try to limit what I use here to stuff that I skim right off the top that I know has been sitting around for a little while. That's a pretty good, generous portion of bedding. Man, for an 11-week-old bin, this thing is definitely filling up nicely. This being its 11th feeding is actually bringing us kind of close to what I usually use as kind of my rule of thumb for cutting off feedings to my bins, which is oftentimes 15 feedings. I find that in a bin this size, based on the way I start, based on the way I feed, so on and so forth, I usually kind of get to that point where I would not want to keep going for much longer or adding much more food, because then I would just sort of feel like I'm working my way out of having enough room in the bin to do basic chores and get work done. This is an interesting large, kind of the middle hunk of a head of cauliflower. I guess there's some stuff frozen to it, but this is the butt end of it, so the head of cauliflower will be out here, all the little stems that the collets are all on. That might be the biggest thing that we're going to be giving these little guys, so why don't we place that in the middle as sort of the, the one object in here, possibly big enough to have leftovers when we get back in here at some point in the future. Just looking at how much we just gave them and whether we can spare maybe a little bit more, because the other container is a little bit smaller. We have a little separate portion of something else in here. Why don't we actually just give them half of whatever's in here? Looks like cuttings of green beans. And what I've got remaining is a nice portion that would be kind of an even split, so we can feed the other bin fairly as far as amount of food to go in. I'm also going to sprinkle out a little bit of this pulverized eggshell, which serves the function of grit for the worms in their diet. Like I said, I've got one of these coffee filters with the coffee in it. I'm only going to give them about half, and I'll save the rest for the other bin that we're feeding next. So things look pretty nice in here. I think we'll just start covering up here. I don't think there's much else to do. these kind of bins that are, especially the other one, it's much younger, but this bin even is still kind of at a fairly intermediate stage as far as being in its life cycle. So I think there's a lot of work to happen still in this bin. Obviously, a lot of bedding material mixed in the bed. Not quite approaching that feeling yet that you're mainly castings down in the bin. It feels like it is pretty, thoroughly mixed with casting material. But there's a whole lot of bedding in here too. Probably more bedding than castings at this point still. I'm just curious about the moisture in here. It's not bad. Even out on the far edges. We've been covering this one with paper only. I think we may have started out with plastic coverings on here. But then we upgraded to paper, I believe, not too long ago. And I just sometimes worry about the ability of the paper to keep moisture in the bin, possibly allowing just a little bit too much of it to escape to evaporation. But I think we're in good shape here. We're going to put on our customary feeding zone indicator to show us where we place today's food. And then we can close up shop here on this bin, the 77-day-old bin, and get the 1-month-old, 31-day-old bin out here. Well, this bin obviously is a bit smaller. Well, like we do sometimes, I think we're just going to bring the camera in a little bit closer since there's a lot less stuff to be seen here. I do promise to get these worms moved out of this little container into a larger tub soon. But for now, hopefully they're doing okay here in this slightly cramped space that I've provided for them. You know, when I first started with the first haul out of, I don't know how many worms. I think we estimated maybe something in the neighborhood of about 130 or so. Or not even estimated, I think we counted. And then maybe another 100 that came in the following haul over. But, for 130 worms, it seemed like this was a suitable size. And I would even say for 230 worms, it's still a pretty suitable size. Here you might have noticed we did have plastic coverings working to protect the material from drying out too rapidly, which would not be a good thing for the occupants of the bin. The stuff out here on the surface definitely feels pretty dry. Maybe not so much on the surface because I'm still feeling the untouched surface here feels pretty good. It might just be the stuff on the very, very edge going down is what I'm feeling as I kind of excavate it out from being along the edge. Bringing out to the top, I could see that it's a little bit dry. And I guess that's because the plastic doesn't cover edge to edge. It does allow for a little bit of airflow and evaporation to happen right along the edges. But I don't think it's really affecting the overall moisture level of the bin. Even on the very edges, as I go down, past halfway down, I'm already seeing nice damp materials. So I don't even know if I explained why, but the reason we're doing this whole thing of extracting adult worms out of the bin that they'd been in over into a new domain of their own, this container here, is because theoretically, I don't know, I'm no expert at this. I'm just following someone else's suggestion that if you do separate the adult worms from the environment that they've been living in and dropping cocoons into, if you relocate them from that material prior to their babies all being hatched and all the babies suddenly zipping around the bin, then you do actually preserve the size of the worms. They stay nice and big. Otherwise, they might tend to start losing mass and becoming smaller in size. And I'm not, that interested in the size of the worms, even though it is kind of impressive when you see one of these African nightcrawlers from northeast worms. They are large, impressive worms. And they're, pretty capable because of their size. They've got a hearty appetite. And they really do break down lots and lots of bedding materials. It's part of the reason, especially with these African nightcrawler systems, I'm really generous with the bedding. Who am I trying to kid? I'm really generous with the bedding in all my systems lately. It's just been my new kick. There is just so much leftover food down in this bin. It really makes me question if we really have equal head count in each of these bins. This system just doesn't seem like it needs more food right now. You know? Excavated, I mean, granted, this banana peel might take some time, as well as its stem. That's mango peel, mango seed. I don't know. I mean, I know that all this stuff that's been in here for the past 8 days, all these fruits, are the things that the worms are going to be able to most easily eat right away, as in now. So they'll continue nibbling on that stuff. And maybe the stuff that I put in today might require a little bit of time to also break down to the point where the worms can begin enjoying that as their nourishment. It's normally, even if I find leftovers, I'm not deterred from putting in the intended feeding in most cases. Because I know that over time that stuff will break down too, but at least maybe I'll kind of make a note to myself that, hey, we might be in for large quantities of leftovers just based on the fact that we fed when we probably didn't even really need to. So I think we'll go ahead and we'll drop in the food that I've got for these little guys. Kind of cram it in here. Alongside a little bit of bedding. You know, if I had more room, if I had already moved this bin's contents and its inhabitants over into a new, larger location, then I wouldn't feel so bad adding a whole bunch of bedding. But I do feel like I'm kind of reaching capacity in this case. So we put a little bit of bedding in here, maybe not as much as we would have otherwise. At some point soon, I promise, we're going to get these little guys relocated into a new space so they could spread out a little bit more. And I'll be curious to see what they make of this feeding that they get here. As you can see, it's about the same amount of green beans as the other bin got. What do we have here? Right here we've got sort of more outer leaves from that head of cauliflower, I believe. Some of these stems and leaves and whatnot. Kind of similar in size as far as the feeding the other bin got. This one also has a little bit of carrot peels mixed in. But I do have a funny feeling that this bin is going to be swimming in leftovers the next time we come in here to check on them. So I want to put this food that I dug out back in here, but I wouldn't want to rest these little guys right on top of a bunch of frozen food. So let's try to insulate the stuff we're putting back slightly here with a little bit of material from elsewhere in the bin. As we bring in these chunks of partially broken down food, we at least give the little wormies a chance to evade the frozen materials. Maybe one thing I could do though is bring a lot of this seemingly dry stuff that I encountered in the beginning and get it out here onto the top, into the middle, right underneath the middle of where the plastic covering is going to be. Because there it'll definitely be exposed to a lot of that recirculating moisture that's going around and around within the bin because of the plastic coverings. And then some of the stuff that's remaining out on the outer edges already has like its own kind of nice moisture content, hopefully retaining it for the most part. Maybe we can also try to be a little bit careful when it comes time to replace the plastic covering to make sure that it is doing a nice thorough job covering things up here to help preserve the moisture content in the bin. But I don't think we have any sort of major danger here in terms of possibility of things drying out. If the plastic didn't get put on very well and it did continue to dry out along those outer edges, I don't think it would be a problem for this bin. The bin seems to be doing quite nicely. So I believe we'll simply put it back just the way we found it, allowing for continued airflow around the edges of the bin and you know, cope with the dryness that causes as time goes on. So we're all set now, feeding my 77-day-old or 11-week-old African nightcrawler system and my newest 31-day-old system. Alright everyone, that's it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching.